Evening, everybody. So this is the Intro GIS Lab 8. It's going to be Recreational Map Analysis. This is Kevin from Map Practical, and here we go. We're going to be looking at an area of the Upper Missouri Breaks National Monument here in Montana, and looking at some distribution of campsites across vegetation and land ownership, and closeness to roads, and then also the ownership patterns in the UMB and within a distance of the river. So I'm going to walk you through it. Okay, so for this lab, I actually give you some data. Here I am in our catalog, and here's my Intro GIS Lab 8. And let's take a look at the raw data that I give you. I give you some campsites. We can preview them. There they are. And then the ownership. Ownership's actually much larger than the vegetation area just along the river that we're working with. I always like to take a look at the properties. So let's see here. This is a NAD 83 coordinate system for the campsites. Take a look at the ownership. I'm really checking to make sure they have some kind of geographic reference system, so a spatial reference system. So state plane on that one. And if it's undefined, then we have to fix that. And this one's also state plane. Great. I also send you out later in the lab to grab some roads from a website. And don't be confused because I have them here. I'm just trying to speed things along, and that's in state plane as well. Okay, great. So I've already made my geodatabase just to move things along. So I have a geodatabase for Lab 8. I made a featured data set, and I've loaded my campsites, my ownership, and my roads and my vegetation into it. And then I set that to NAD 83, that featured data set, so that it would convert all those various coordinate systems and projections into one. Okay, great. All right, we're ready to go. Let's open up an ArcMap document. Let me go over here and read and take a sip of my tea. All right, we're going to do just a blank map, and I'm going to bring it over. He always wants to set it up over on my other computer. So there it is. There's my ArcMap. So while I'm here, I'll go to my file and my map document properties. And then down here under default geodatabase, I'm going to set it to my Lab 8 geodatabase. There we go. And then while I'm here, I'm going to store the relative path names to just help my data find its location later on. And now I can go to add data, go inside my feature data set for the UMB, and let's just add, actually we're just going to add vegetation, campsites, and ownership for now. We'll get to the roads in a bit. All right. So there they are. It covers quite a large area, and if I turn off the vegetation, you can see the ownership is all there, and turn just the vegetation, it's just along the river, right? And then we have our campsites that are all along the Upper Missouri Breaks River area. Okay. So we're going to have to clean this data up. We got a lot of stuff that we don't need, and I'll be working through this for a while, and then we'll probably do a part 2 on this video because it's a long analysis, so stick with me, okay? All right. So first things first, what's the coordinate system when this data comes in? Well, if we take a look at the layer properties, which is the data frame, it's in NAD 83. And what's the reason for that? Well, the reason for that is because ArcMap always absorbs the coordinate system or projection of the first piece of data that you put into it. So that's why it's in NAD 83. But we want to set it to Montana state plane. So we're going to go down to our projected coordinate systems. We're going to go to state plane. I'm going to go to NAD 83 US feet and then scroll down and find good old Montana. There we go. And this is the one we're looking for, NAD 83, state plane, Montana, FIPS 2,500 US feet. Say OK. All right, so now we got a projected data frame, and now would be a good time to save our ArcMap document. And we're going to put it into Lab 8. Great. And I'm just going to call this UMB Rec for recreation. And it's going to save it as an MXD. There we go. Okay. First things first. I'm going to start by, let's see, working with the vegetation. So I'll turn off ownership for a second and turn off campsites. I'll right click and say zoom to layer on the veg. Okay, and then I'm going to open up the attribute table. I'm just holding down the control while I double click on it. And right now there are 6,775 rows, and you can see that right down here in the attribute table. I'm going to create a new field. So I'm going to go from the table drop down to add a field. Let's see, oh, it's saying I have a schema lock, and I know why that is, and that's because I have Arc Catalog open looking at the same geodatabase. So if I turn Arc Catalog off and go back and try it one more time to add a field, now I can do it. All right, so what we're looking for here is hectares. So hectares, all right, and I'm going to make these guys a double so that I don't lose anything to rounding error. And then I'm just going to right click on that new hectares field and go to the calculate geometry and then tell it that I want to calculate for hectares. So there we go. That should rip up pretty fast. Cool. So if I take the hectares field and look at the statistics, the number right here, this sum, 30,104 and a little bit, is the number of hectares that we have in this original vegetation. And that is actually the answer to number 2. So 6,775 individual polygons and 30,104 hectares. Okay, and now we're going to do the exact same thing for the ownership layer. So turn off this one, go in here, let's take a look at my ownership layer, and I'm going to create a hectares field for this guy. And also make it a double. Say OK. And right click and go to calculate geometry. And we're going to calculate hectares there. Say OK. And let that rip for a second. And you can see down here how many individual polygons we have now. 136,826. Takes a little while because there's a lot of polygons. Good opportunity to take some throat coat tea. All right. Now, if we go up to the hectares and look at its statistics, we will notice that the sum on this one is 6,533,768 hectares and a little bit. And so that's the answer to number 3 in the lab instructions. Okay? All right. All right, so now that we've got that figured out, we need to reduce the overall complexity of this whole thing. So what we're going to do is go back to vegetation. So there's our vegetation layer, and we're going to run the dissolve tool on it. So you could get to the dissolve tool by going to the toolbox up here. You could also search for it under your search bar. And it'll be over on the side, or you can get to the search bar from right here. But it's a tool that we use all the time, and so some of these are stored under geoprocessing. So we'll just grab it from right there. So here's the dissolve tool. We're going to put our vegetation in there. And then the output feature class, it's going to name it. Maybe. You can do it. There we go. Vegetation dissolve, which is great, but I want to put it inside the feature data set. So I'm just going to copy that name, click on the path, go inside my feature data set and paste it in there. There we go. Great. And then what we want to dissolve this on is river guide. Now river guide is the one inside there that tells us the different types of vegetation along the river. So we'll say OK after checking that. And what this does is anything that has the same exact name under river guide, it's going to make it one polygon. So there you go. It was pretty fast. It's complete. Let's open it up. So there you go. We've gone from 6,000 some odd down to 5 different rows. And we've got one for deciduous forest land, forested, island, other, and river. Okay? And we're going to calculate some hectares on this guy again. So add a field, hectares. Change that to a double. And then right click here and go to calculate geometry again and choose hectares. All right, pretty quick. And we'll take a look at this one by looking at the statistics. So now we've got 25,911 and some change, right? So that's the answer to number 4. There are 5 polygons now and a total of about 25,912 hectares. So what did the dissolve do? Well, it said anything in this river guide column that has the same name, put it into one polygon. But we did lose quite a bit because before we had a little over 30,000 hectares. So that's because there's going to be some rounding error, and also because probably the polygons weren't coincident, meaning their borders didn't line up exactly and there was overlaps. And so all those little slivers were lost in the dissolve process. So having a properly made GIS data is important. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing for our ownership. So we're going to grab that dissolve tool again. We're going to drag ownership in there. And we're going to keep this ownership dissolve name again by just copying it, but I definitely want it to go inside the feature data set. And say save. And then this one is called owner class. So we're going to dissolve on the owner class field. And let me just make sure I'm doing that properly. Yep, okay. And we'll let this rip. Now this one might take a little while because it's dealing with, remember, we have over 136,000 polygons. So while that's running, I'm going to go ahead and go over to this data site. Let's see if this works out. And this should pop up in front of us in a second. Taxing the computer now. Doesn't know what to do. It's having a hard time. Oh, there we go. Cool. That actually gave me 2 copies of it. I don't think I clicked it twice. Okay, so this is the Montana State Library and its Geographic Information Clearinghouse. And right here in this list, I'm just going to type in roads and search. And it's going to bring up a page with tons of roads for the state of Montana. And under the Historic Records tab here, I'm going to go down and have you guys download the Montana roads from Tiger Line files from 2000. And then it'll bring it up, and that's all the roads, state highways, county roads, dirt roads, Forest Service roads, everything. And you're just going to download that data by clicking on the button here, and it'll let you take a zip and you put it into your raw data folder. Okay? So I've already done this. I already unzipped it, and I already added it to the geodatabase to the featured data set. But you'll have to do that at this step. Okay? So we got our dissolve complete back here in ArcMap. Let's take a look at the attribute table for that guy. So wow, we got down from 136,000 plus polygons to 17. Let's create a hectares field. And double again, and let that get calculated by going to calculate geometry. Make sure you always choose hectares. If you have ridiculous numbers, it's probably because you accidentally said like square feet or something, and then you'll have billions of them. Okay, so now our total under statistics is 6,533,487,000, all right, hectares. And that is the answer for, what number is that? Number 6, okay? So 17 polygons is what it was dissolved down to, and 6,533,487 hectares. Okay. All right. So let's add our road data real fast. So I'm going to move this ownership dissolve down below. Can turn off the original. We don't even need the original vegetation, so I'm just going to remove it and the original ownership because we're going to be working just with the dissolves. Turn that vegetation on there. Great. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my roads from the 2000 census. And if I change their color, they'll show up better on screen. What if I go with like a black road style? There they are. So there's all those messy roads. Don't worry about all this mess. That's what we're going through now, this process of cleaning this stuff up, okay? All right. So what we need to do next is we need to buffer the vegetation, because what we want to do is just create a zone that's within 5 kilometers of the Upper Missouri River Breaks recreation area that is this vegetation layer, and then clip all of these ownership and all these roads to it. So I'm going to turn off the roads and the ownership now so we can see the buffer process. And buffer tool is also located, of course, in the toolbox, but it's also here under geoprocessing because we tend to use it a lot. So we're going to throw our vegetation dissolve in there. And this is the vegetation dissolve buffer, which is a perfectly legit name for it, but I definitely want to put it inside my feature data set. So I'll just copy and paste the name in there. And then we're going to have to tell it that we want 5 kilometers. right? And you could put 5,000 meters, it would be the same thing, right? So you have all these different values available, and I'm going to say okay and let that run. Might take a second, it's a lot of area that it's trying to work with. Sometimes patience is a virtue, especially in GIS. That's why I like a nice cup of tea as I do my GIS. So I hope everybody's safe and healthy at home during this crazy COVID experience. Maybe years and years in the future, people will listen to this video and go, what's that? What's he talking about? And look it up. I'm sure there'll be a Wikipedia page. All right. So I'll just pull this over for a second and show you guys. So this is what we're working through. We already went through 4, 5, 6. We downloaded the data. Now we've got both the ownership and the roads, and we're creating this buffer, 5 kilometers around it, and then we're going to clip it. So we're going to use this buffer that we're creating to clip the ownership and the roads so that we can reduce the overall complexity of our data, right? And then of course we'll have to recalculate our hectares field. When you run these big clips and dissolves and things, it's always a good idea to recalculate your area fields, because they can definitely get a little bit wonky if you don't, okay? All right, let's pull this back and see where we're at. No, it still says 0%. It's going to get there, I promise. It's going to jump to 100 any second now. Oh, the little spinning wheel, that's a good thing. It's a working. Now, I have the geoprocessing background unenabled, so you see this little tool and it tells you what's going on. Usually it'll be down here in a ticker on the bottom. So anybody who doesn't remember how to do that, it's under geoprocessing and then geoprocessing options, and then you have to uncheck the box for background processing. It won't let me do it or even open the geoprocessing tool while it's trying to work through this. So I'm not going to crash the system here. I'm just going to let it work. It's taking quite some time now. Oop, there we go. I told you, it's going to jump to 100. It's okay to have a moment of silence when you're doing GIS, especially if ArcMap crashes on you. Then you're going to need to get on your knees and pray a little bit. All right, there we go. Well, that took some time, but we got it now. So we got this big worm. I'm going to go ahead and move it down below things so you can just see. So we still have our river vegetation in there, and then this buffer. All right, so now we want to clean up, and let's do the, which one first? We're going to do the ownership. So I'm going to turn on my ownership and see how big it is. It's just massive. I'm going to move that down low, and we're going to clip it by this buffer. So I'm going to open up my clip tool, which is also under geoprocessing, and the input features are going to be my ownership dissolve, and then the cut features are going to be the buffer. So this is like the cookie cutter. It's going to cut the ownership dissolve by this buffer and create a new one, a new piece of data, and we're going to stick it inside of our feature data set. There we go. That's our ownership dissolve clip, and say save, and then let it rip. And that won't take too long because it's just chopping it. All right, very cool. Okay, so that worked. So now we have just the ownership within that 5 kilometer buffer. So actually I can turn off the original ownership, and you can see it's much smaller now. I'll pull this down. And we got to do one last thing. We don't even need the old ownership dissolve because we have the ownership dissolve clip. So I'm just going to remove that one. We'll just try and keep our ArcMap clean. And now we need to take all these roads from the whole state of Montana and also clip them. So we'll do geoprocessing, clip. We're going to drag our roads in there. And the clip feature again is the buffer. And then the roads clip is a perfectly acceptable name, but we're going to put that again in our feature data set. And then I'm going to let that rip. And that shouldn't take long at all because it's just line work, okay? So we can turn off our original roads. And actually I'm just going to remove them. And there we go. So now we have the roads inside this area right here. Great. And now we don't even need the vegetation dissolve buffer. So I'm going to right click on that and remove it. Cool. Let's take a look at the ownership dissolve clip, and we're going to have to recalculate the hectares just to make sure they're correct. Calculate the geometry, go to hectares, say OK. Cool. All right, and so this is the answer to number 7 in the lab, and that's going to be that there are now 8 owner class polygons, right? Local government, private, right-of-way, state government, undermined, BLM, fish and wildlife, and then water. And then the hectares, if we take a look at the statistics, are going to add up to 281,517 hectares. And is that right? Yes, it is. Very good. Okay. So one last thing before we take a break is that we can clean this up and now make it a little bit better of a map. So I'm going to go under my ownership dissolve properties by double clicking on the layer, and on the Symbology tab, instead of just a single symbol, I'm going to go to categories, and then owner class is the field I want, and then I'm going to say add all values. Great. And then I'll turn off this one, and actually I'm going to go for something that's kind of in the brown spectrum. Okay. We'll go ahead and say OK. So there you go on that. And then we're going to do the same thing for the vegetation. And we'll go to category for that one. And this one's river guide. We'll add all values. And let's go with some kind of greens for vegetation. Maybe something along those lines. And then the river, I'll just double click on that one and make it a river color. There's that. And I don't like that this forested is so close to blue, so I'll change it to another color, green. Do something along, or maybe there you go, like a hunter green. Cool. And I say OK. Yep. And now if I zoom in, you can see that we've got our ownership that's classified by different colors. We've got our vegetation around the river that's classified. We could probably make our roads a little bit bolder so they stand out. There we go. And then let's turn on our campsites, and we'll make those stand out. Maybe a little triangle, make it a little bit smaller, like 13 or so. And what if we made those guys a nice red tent for campsites? There we go. All right. So now we've got ourselves a decent looking map that is going to be helpful as we start to move through the analysis, trying to find out some of the statistics around the different vegetation classes and ownership for these campsites along the upper Missouri River breaks. Okay. We'll zoom out to the full extent, save our ArcMap document. And this is a good place to take a break, get another cup of tea, and we'll come back for part 2 and the second video in just a minute. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in just a second.